The worst nights don't announce themselves. They slip in quietly, dressed as something hopeful, then break you piece by piece. Asterisk Jonathan Reeves sat alone in his car outside a dimly lit restaurant in Austin, Texas, staring at his reflection. In the rearview mirror, like he didn't recognize the man looking back, his shirt was wrinkled, his hair slightly messy from running his hands through it too many times, and his eyes, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Hour ago, he had walked into that restaurant believing, for once, that something good might finally happen to him. Now, he felt like the universe had personally picked him for another cruel joke. Asterisk. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that even the worst nights can lead to something beautiful, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, drop a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means more than you think. Asterisk Jonathan had never been lucky in love. At 31, he carried the quiet weight of too many failed attempts, too many almosts, and too many nights spent wondering what was wrong with him. His friends used to joke that he was too nice, but over time, that stopped feeling like a compliment. It felt like a reason people walked all over him. Asterisk, the date had started like any other. Her name was Vanessa Carter, someone he met through a dating app after weeks of hesitation. She had seemed kind in her messages, warm even, the kind of person who used smiley faces and asked thoughtful questions. For the first time in a long while, Jonathan had allowed himself to feel excited. He had ironed his best shirt, rehearsed conversations in his head, and even arrived 10 minutes early, just to make sure everything went perfectly. But perfection never came. Vanessa arrived 20 minutes late, was barely apologizing as she sat down, and immediately checked her phone. Jonathan tried to brush it off, telling himself people get busy, that maybe she was just nervous too. He smiled, asked her about her day, tried to create a comfortable space between them, but every word he spoke seemed to fall into a void. She responded with half-hearted answers, and her attention constantly drifting back to her screen. Asterisk, then came the moment that shattered everything. Asterisk, halfway through dinner, laughed at something on her phone and without even looking up casually, mentioned that her ex had texted her again. She talked about him with a spark in her voice that Jonathan hadn't heard directed toward him all night. And then, almost absent-mindedly, she said she wasn't really over him yet. Asterisk, it felt like someone had pulled the ground out from under Jonathan's feet. Asterisk, he nodded politely, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack his face in half. Inside, something was collapsing. He had been here before, sitting across from someone who didn't see him, didn't choose him, didn't even consider him an option. But somehow it hurt more this time, because he had dared to hope. Asterisk, by the time the check arrived, Vanessa had already mentally checked out. He offered a quick, insincere thank you, and left before he could even process what had happened. Jonathan sat there for a moment longer, staring at the empty chair across from him, feeling like he had just been erased. Asterisk, that's how he ended up in his car, gripping the steering wheel as if it were the only thing keeping him grounded. The city lights blurred in his vision, and for a brief moment, he wondered if maybe this was it. Maybe some people just weren't meant to find someone. Maybe he was one of them. The thought settled heavy in his chest. But life has a strange way of interrupting our darkest conclusions. Asterisk, Jonathan's phone buzzed, pulling him out of his spiral. He glanced at the screen, expecting it to be some automated notification or a work email. Instead, it was a message from someone unexpected. Clara Mitchell, his coworker. Asterisk, Jonathan blinked in confusion. Clara was the last person he expected to hear from at that moment. She worked in the same office as him, a few desks away, always friendly, but never overly personal. She had a quiet confidence about her, the kind that didn't demand attention, but naturally drew people in. They exchanged occasional jokes, helped each other with work tasks, and sometimes shared coffee breaks. But that was the extent of it. Her message was simple. Are you still out? Asterisk, Jonathan hesitated before replying. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he debated whether to ignore it, but something about the timing, about the way it cut through his loneliness, made him respond. Asterisk, yeah, just finished. A few seconds passed, then another message appeared. Asterisk, can you come to the park near our office? I'm here. Asterisk, Jonathan frowned, glancing around as if the answer might be hidden somewhere in the night. It didn't make sense. Why would she be at the park this late? Asterisk, he typed back, everything okay? The reply came almost instantly. Not really. Just need someone I trust. Please. Asterisk, there was something in those words that hit him differently. In a night where he had felt completely invisible, someone was reaching out to him, choosing him, trusting him. So he started the car. The drive to the park was short, but his mind was anything but calm. Questions raced through his head, mixing with the lingering sting of his failed date. By the time he arrived, the air felt heavier, charged with something he couldn't quite name. Asterisk, he spotted Clara sitting on a bench under a flickering streetlight. Her silhouette outlined against the darkness looked smaller somehow, like the weight of whatever she was carrying had physically pulled her inward. Asterisk, Jonathan approached slowly, unsure of what he was walking into. Asterisk, when she looked up and saw him. There was a moment, a brief, fragile moment where her composed exterior cracked. Her eyes were red, her expression vulnerable in a way he had never seen before. Asterisk, and then, without any build-up, without any explanation, she said something that would change everything. She asked him if he could be her boyfriend. The words hung in the air, surreal and impossible. Asterisk, Jonathan froze, certain he had misheard. His mind scrambled to make sense of it, to fit it into some logical framework, but nothing worked. Just an hour ago, he had been sitting across from someone who barely acknowledged his existence. And now, here was Clara, looking at him like he mattered more than anything. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he sat down beside her, giving the moment space to breathe. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, it was heavy, it was meaningful. Filled with unspoken emotions, Clara eventually explained. Her ex had shown up at her apartment that evening, uninvited and persistent. He hadn't hurt her, but his presence alone had shaken her. He refused to accept that their relationship was over, insisting they were meant to be together. Clara had managed to leave, coming to the park to clear her head, but the fear lingered. Asterisk, she needed someone to stand beside her, not just for protection, but for reassurance. For strength, asterisk, and for reasons she couldn't fully explain, the first person she thought of was Jonathan. Asterisk. Not because he was convenient, because he was kind, because he listened. Asterisk, because he made her feel safe in a way she hadn't realized until that moment. Asterisk, Jonathan felt something shift inside him as she spoke. The same heart that had been breaking just moments ago now felt seen, not in a grand romantic way, but in something deeper, something more real. He realized that this wasn't about pretending, it was about showing up. So he said yes. Days that followed were unexpected. Asterisk, what started as a simple favor slowly turned into something genuine. They spent more time together, not just to maintain appearances, but because they wanted to. They talked about everything, their fears, their pasts, the quiet insecurities they both carried. Asterisk, Jonathan told her about the date, about how invisible it had made him feel. Clara listened, truly listened, her eyes soft with understanding. Asterisk and asterisk. And then she told him something that stayed with him. Asterisk, she said that sometimes the right people don't come into your life when you're at your best. They come when you're at your lowest, because that's when you're most real. Weeks turned into months. The line between pretend and real disappeared, so naturally that neither of them could pinpoint when it happened. Asterisk, Jonathan found himself smiling more, laughing more, feeling lighter in a way he hadn't experienced in years. Clara became a constant in his life, not as someone who needed saving, but as someone who stood beside him, equal and strong. Asterisk, and one evening, as they sat on that same park bench where everything had started, she looked at him with a quiet certainty and said she didn't want to pretend anymore. She wanted something real with him. Asterisk, if this story is touching your heart, if you believe that even the worst nights can lead to something beautiful, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps these stories reach people who need them the most. Asterisk, and before we reach the end, here's a special request. Comment second chances are real if you believe that life can surprise you in the most unexpected ways. Asterisk Jonathan smiled, not the forced, polite smile he had worn on countless disappointing dates, but a genuine one that came from somewhere deep within. For the first time, he didn't feel like he was chasing something that didn't want him. He felt chosen. That terrible night, the one that had nearly broken him, had led him here to a moment he never saw coming, to a person who saw him for who he truly was. And maybe that's how life works. Maybe sometimes things fall apart not to leave us empty, but to make space for something better, something real, something worth waiting for.